My daughter was 7. In the hospital, she pressed an old stuffed rabbit to her chest and whispered, "Dad, if I'm not here anymore, listen to him. He knows everything." I hugged her. "Stop that nonsense. You're going to get better." She shook her head. A week later, I cut open the rabbit. Inside was a child's smartwatch with recordings on it. When I pressed play, my whole world collapsed. Daniel Miller had spent 38 years of his life hearing things other people missed. He worked as a maintenance and commissioning engineer at a manufacturing plant outside Pittsburgh. Boiler systems, compressor stations, machines as heavy as rail cars. Those were his world. When a bearing started giving out, it didn't announce itself with a roar. It began with the slightest change in the hum. Daniel could hear it from 3 bays across the shop floor, while his co-workers were still calmly finishing coffee in the break room. The shift supervisor, Paul Harris, known to everyone as Pops, a man who always seemed to have a matchstick between his teeth, used to tell new hires, "Our Miller can feel a pipe better than he ever understood his own wife." Maybe that's why she ran off. Daniel never took offense. Pops was half right. His wife really had left, though the pipes had nothing to do with it. Then Daniel would come home and try to be a father. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. Once, he reheated oatmeal for his daughter so aggressively that the bowl fused itself to the plate. The ceramic practically became one solid object. You could have sent it to a museum of industrial disasters. For a week, Tessa brought every guest into the kitchen. "Behold," she would say, pointing at the object with the solemn authority of a museum guide. "My dad fixes everything at the plant, but at home he melts things and sets them on fire." "Tess, come on," Daniel said from the doorway, trying to preserve what dignity he had left. That only happened once, actually twice. Who turned the electric kettle into a lump of plastic in September? I forgot about that. No, Dad, it melted itself. It was defective. Dad, kettles don't melt by themselves. Even I know that. Daniel opened his mouth, closed it again, and decided not to argue with a daughter who clearly understood the subject better than he did. Tessa always ended the tour with the same line. "So, I'm responsible for keeping order in this house." She said it with such calm seriousness that adults could not immediately tell whether she was joking or drafting an official report on her father's incompetence. She was not joking. Tessa Miller was the kind of child who made adults feel as if they had not quite managed to become real grown-ups. She was thin, small for her age, with a face that looked deceptively calm. She watched the world closely and held on to every detail. She did not throw tantrums. When something hurt, she pressed her lips together, and if Daniel was not paying careful attention, he might not notice at all. When she saw that he had come home from a shift with his shoulders heavy, she did something almost impossible for a child. She stepped back, quietly entertained herself, and let him sit down and breathe. Tessa had a stuffed rabbit named Scout. He was old, with one ear longer than the other, and a split seam along his side. She carried him everywhere, hugged him to her chest when she didn't feel well, and talked to him in a low voice, leaning close to his worn-out face. One night, as Daniel was leaving for a night shift, he called from the door, "Scout, you're in charge while I'm gone. Keep an eye on things." Tessa looked up at him. "He already controls the situation. He does. He works while you're on shift, and when I'm home, then he backs you up, just in case." Daniel smiled and left. It was just a child's game, nothing more. Then the faucet started leaking. Daniel called a plumber, a quiet man from the building maintenance company. The man laid out his tools and crawled under the sink. A moment later, Tessa appeared in the bathroom doorway with Scout tucked under her arm. "Good afternoon," she said. "This is my security guard. He'll make sure you do everything properly." The plumber froze with the wrench in his hand and looked at Daniel. Daniel spread his hands. "Accept it. Arguing is useless. She runs a tight operation." "And what happens if I mess up and bend the pipe wrong?" the plumber asked, deciding to play along. Tessa held Scout a little tighter. "He'll remember everything, and he has an excellent memory for faces." The man told that story to the entire building afterward. For a month, the neighbors asked Tessa how the head of security was doing whenever they saw her. Tessa answered briefly, "The site is under control." Tessa's mother, Lauren, had gone back to her maiden name, Walker, after the divorce. She left when her daughter was 3, not completely, but halfway. Every few months, she appeared, cried, promised she would change, called in the middle of the night sobbing, swore that this time everything would be different, and then disappeared again. Daniel's sister, Rebecca once asked him directly, "Are you still hoping she'll come back?" "Rebecca, stop. I'm not waiting for anybody. My phone is on 24 hours a day because the clinic or the daycare might call if something happens to Tess. If Lauren calls, it means the call is not about anything useful." He had stopped expecting anything from his ex-wife, not because he had forgiven her, but because he had run out of fuel. Hatred is a privilege for people who have extra time and strength. A single father has neither. After Lauren left, Rebecca became his main support. She came over after his shifts, stayed with Tessa, picked her up from daycare, fed her, and put her to bed. Daniel gave her spare keys and lowered every guard inside himself because she was Rebecca, his blood, the person he had known since birth. Then the diagnosis came, Wilms tumor, a malignant kidney cancer. The oncologist at the Children's Hospital spoke in a careful, sterile language: stage, protocol, course of treatment, monitoring. "If we follow the protocol precisely, we have a good chance." The doctor looked at Daniel over the folder of test results. "However, the tumor is aggressive. It's difficult to say how her body will respond to chemotherapy. We start treatment and watch the progress." "And that's it?" Daniel heard his own voice as if it belonged to someone else. "Just watch and wait. We treat and monitor the situation, Mr. Miller. That is real work. It is not just waiting." He nodded, went out into the hallway, sat on a bench, braced his elbows on his knees, and stared for several minutes at the floor where the reflections of the lights trembled. At the plant, when a machine started running wild, there was a sequence: emergency shutdown, pressure release, call the crew. Here, there was no sequence. Here, he had to wait. The next day, Pops came up to him in the break room, sat across from him, chewed on his matchstick, and said, "All right, Miller, tell me what's going on with your little girl." Daniel told him briefly, dryly, in 3 sentences. Pops was quiet for a moment. Then he took the matchstick out of his mouth and said, "Listen, if you need me to cover you or move the schedule around, say the word. I'll handle it. And knock off that fanatic routine of yours. Factory heroes usually end badly. We don't have enough space for all the plaques." "Pops, I'm managing. Everything's fine." "Sure, I can see you're fine from here. You look like you're holding up the whole power plant by yourself, and you haven't slept in 3 days. You need a break, you tell me." End of discussion. Daniel nodded, not because he planned to ask, but because his throat had tightened and speaking had become difficult. The months after the diagnosis blurred into a dull gray strip. Wake up before dawn. Pack Tessa's hospital bag. Get through a shift in a way that kept management from noticing only half of him was still functioning. Eat lunch on his feet, leaning against a wall in a plant corridor. Then drive across the city to the hospital. Into that loop stepped Rebecca with containers of food, ready-made decisions, and the calm, practical voice of an older sister. "Danny, when was the last time you slept properly? At least 4 hours in a row? Honestly, I don't even remember. I'm serious." "So am I. The last time I remember passing out was Memorial Day weekend. I crashed on the couch until evening." Tessa took advantage of the moment and drew all over my face with a green marker. She even printed a message across my forehead. What did it say? "Do not wake. Guarding." Rebecca did not smile. "Lie down and sleep. I'll sit with her. And I probably shouldn't show you a mirror right now." Then she added, "By the way," said, "he has good connections with an excellent oncologist at a private clinic. He promised to help push through coverage through his people and get access to an imported medication that you can't just find at a regular pharmacy." Leo Walker, Lauren's brother, a man who always had the right contact, the right plan, the right way in. He spoke softly, smiled a little wider than the situation called for, and gave the impression of a person ready to help, but never for free. Daniel admitted to himself that he had never liked Leo. But when your daughter is lying after chemo with a gray face and someone says the word medication, a father's heart stops filtering and grabs any hand reaching toward him. Leo appeared more and more often in hospital hallways, in the parking lot outside the clinic, over the phone. "How are we doing today? How's our girl?" He began every call with that sympathetic half-question. "Seems a little better," Daniel answered. "The fever's down. She even ate a little." "Good. That's good. Listen, I talked to Dr. Rustam from the clinic. He's ready to personally look at the scans. And about the referral, I've got someone at the front desk. We can move the line along, no problem. Send me all the documents, and I'll handle it myself. You don't need to run from office to office and wreck your nerves. Leo, thank you. I can go myself. I'll manage." "Of course you can go, but why waste time? Right now you need to work and be with your daughter. Let me take something off your plate. I'll do it." So Daniel handed things over. First one referral, then test results, then a discharge summary, then the next stack of prescriptions and orders. Document after document, without reading closely, without checking, because there was not a minute or a shred of attention left for checking. Everything connected to his daughter's treatment, every lab result, every referral, every stamped certificate passed through Leo Walker's hands. Not a single complete set of papers reached Daniel directly anymore. Everything went through a middleman. Nights in the oncology ward had their own rhythm. The IV cart at 6. Rounds at 7. Quiet by 9. When the children fell asleep and the parents lay on folding cots with their eyes open, listening to every breath. Daniel learned to sleep in 20-minute fragments, waking at any rustle. In 2 months, he learned every sound in the room. The hum of the machine, the click of the door handle, the nurse's steps in the hallway. Tessa held on. After another round of chemo, she lay pale, her little face sharper than before, but she rarely got fussy and complained even less. Daniel brushed what remained of her hair with a soft brush he had bought at the pharmacy downstairs and told her stories from the plant, trying to choose the funny ones. "Dad, did a kettle really catch fire at your work?" "It did." Pops turned on the hot plate and went to argue with his wife on the phone. 20 minutes later, he came back, and the break room looked like a swamp. In a fog, the guys came running with fire extinguishers and foamed everything they could reach. But the kettle survived. Melted a little, sure, but it still whistled like new. Seriously? It still whistled? Of course. It was old school steel, built to last forever. You couldn't scare that thing with a nuclear blast. Tessa smiled weakly and turned her head toward Scout, who lay beside her on the pillow. Just like our Scout. Nothing can take him down either. One day, Daniel brought a casserole from home. He had made it himself. He found the recipe online, read it 3 times, and did everything exactly as written. Tessa opened the container, studied the contents for a long moment, and lifted a questioning look toward her father. "Dad, what is this culinary masterpiece? Casserole, secret internet recipe. Why does it look like someone drove a steamroller over it?" "Almost right. I carried it in my bag, and then a seat suddenly opened up on the bus. I got so happy that I sat down right on the bag." Tessa began to laugh, quietly, carefully, pressing a hand to her stomach because the laughter pulled somewhere deep inside, but she could not stop. A nurse peeked in at the sound, lingered in the doorway, and could not help laughing too. "At least it was made with heart," Daniel said, spreading his hands with offended dignity. "And 100% personal commitment." Tessa ate the flattened casserole with an appetite she had not had in days. Then she turned to the girl in the next bed, 10-year-old Katie, and announced, "My dad fixes huge turbines at the plant, but he couldn't handle an ordinary oven." "At least he's honest," Katie replied. "My dad doesn't go near the stove at all. The most he can do is fry eggs, and even then he turns the crust into charcoal every time." "See?" Tessa looked at Daniel again. "Compared to that, you're basically a chef." He laughed. Then he stepped out into the hallway, leaned his back against the wall, and stood there for several minutes, with his eyes closed. Because this little girl, after her 3rd round of chemotherapy, was comforting him, and he had no answer for that. That evening, Tessa sat in bed, propped against a pillow, while Daniel sat beside her, scrolling through a work message. She reached out and took his hand. Her fingers were warm but light, almost weightless. "Dad, what about the kitten?" "What kitten?" "The kitten we said we'd get when I come home. As soon as they discharge you, we'll go look, and we have to order a huge pizza, the kind where there's twice as much cheese as crust." "Deal, deal. We'll find the biggest pizza in the city." He put the phone away and covered her hand with his own, a hand bigger than the kitchen table. Tessa studied his face for a few seconds with an expression that made him uneasy. Too careful, too grown-up. Then she pressed Scout tighter to her chest. "Dad, please stop making that tragic face. Right now, your face scares me more than all the shots put together." 3 nights later, around 2 in the morning, she called him. Daniel rose from the cot instantly. He slept in his clothes, ready to jump up at any sound. "Tess, what is it? Are you hurting?" "No, it's okay. Sit with me." He sat on the edge of the bed. Tessa took him by the wrist, weakly, but with a frightening steadiness. "Dad, if I'm suddenly not here anymore, you have to check Scout. There are recordings inside him. Listen to them alone, okay? Don't tell anyone. No one at all." "What nonsense. Stop it. We're going home soon, remember? What about our double cheese pizza? Did you forget?" She shook her head. "Promise me, please." "Tess, Dad, just promise." He swallowed the lump in his throat and nodded. "I promise." Then he fixed her blanket, and they never returned to that conversation. Daniel convinced himself it was a child's fear born from the hospital and the medicine. A symbolic goodbye that did not need to be taken literally. In a year, he thought, they would sit in the kitchen and remember it, and Tessa would say something ironic, because she always found the right words. Later, when he replayed everything in his mind, he understood why she had not told him directly. Rebecca and Leo had explained to the child that Daddy could not be worried. He was tired from work. He might get sick too. Tessa was afraid for him. She had worked up the courage several times to start the conversation, but every time someone was there. Aunt Rebecca would rush in to visit. Uncle Leo would stop by for just a minute. They appeared with perfect timing. A week later, Tessa was gone. At the funeral, Daniel stood with the stuffed rabbit in his hands and spoke to no one. Relatives exchanged looks. A grown man holding a toy against his chest. Someone put a hand on his shoulder and said, "Stay strong, buddy. She's in a better place now." Daniel looked at him, and the man removed his hand. That night, Daniel sat in Tessa's room in the dark, surrounded by her things. Drawings on the wall, a cup full of markers, a pink hairbrush, a little box of hair clips. He pressed Scout to his chest and felt something hard inside. He froze. He touched the split seam along the side, took scissors from the cup on the desk, carefully widened the opening, and pushed his fingers into the stuffing, plastic casing. A child's smartwatch, the same one he had bought her 6 months earlier so she could call him from the hospital room, with an emergency button and a voice recording feature. Rebecca had said the watch must have been lost somewhere in the hospital. Tessa had not lost it. She had hidden it. Daniel pressed play, expecting to hear a goodbye. His daughter's voice saying, "I love you." The first recording, the rustle of a blanket, muted breathing. Daddy's at work, on the night shift. Aunt Rebecca and Uncle Leo are sitting with me. They think I'm already sound asleep, but I can hear everything. The second recording, Tessa's voice, hurried, with pauses. She was listening to something. They're whispering about something in the hallway again. Uncle Leo says if Dad finds out about everything, they're finished. Aunt Rebecca says he definitely won't come until morning, so everything is fine. I don't understand what's happening, but I feel bad about it. The third recording, Rebecca's voice, gentle, caring, with an intonation that made Daniel's jaw lock because he knew that tone. It was real, warm, sisterly. "Tess, sweetheart, you're such a big, smart girl. You don't need to tell Daddy about our conversations. He's already dead on his feet from work. If he worries too much, he could get sick himself. You don't want Daddy to get sick, do you?" Tessa's quiet voice answered, "No, that's right. Good girl. Let's keep this our little secret. We're taking care of him together, aren't we?" Daniel stopped the recording, rewound it, listened to that fragment again. His 7-year-old daughter, in the middle of chemotherapy, had been taught to stay silent by the voice she had obeyed since she was 3. The fourth recording, 2 voices, Leo and Rebecca, somewhere nearby behind a half-open door or in the hallway. Leo spoke quietly, businesslike. "Understand this. As long as the girl is in the hospital room, the donations are rolling in beautifully. Fresh photos, people feel sorry for her. Money keeps coming. The second she goes into remission, or if they discharge her, that's it. The store closes. The stream dries up." Rebecca's voice was fast and nervous. "Leo, I think she understands everything. Yesterday she looked at me in this way that made my skin crawl." "Stop it, Rebecca. She's 7. She's pale and weak after treatments. What could she possibly understand? She won't tell anyone. We'll calmly finish everything off. Don't panic." The final recording. Tessa. Her voice was tired, but clear. She pronounced every word carefully. She was trying hard. "Dad, if you turned on this recording, it means I couldn't tell you myself. I tried really hard, but Aunt Rebecca was watching me all the time. I put the watch inside Scout. Nobody ever takes him away from me. Dad, don't believe them. Not at all. They're lying to you. I heard them being happy about the money and saying you couldn't know anything. Daddy, I don't completely understand what they're planning, but it's something really bad. Please do something. You know how to fix everything that's broken." Daniel sat motionless in the dark room. A tear slid down his cheek without a sound. He did not wipe it away. "You know how to fix everything that's broken." That was their phrase, from their life. from their kitchen, from rushed mornings before daycare when she believed her father could fix absolutely anything in the world. He did not call Rebecca. He did not dial her number to scream into the phone. A man who runs into a fight in the heat of the moment only helps the guilty cover their tracks. Daniel had heard about Nell Brooks from a coworker at the plant. A few years earlier, she had uncovered a theft scheme at another facility, a private investigator, former police detective. Daniel called her the next morning. She received him in a small office on the third floor of an office building behind the train station. She listened without interrupting, took the watch, put on headphones, and listened to each fragment twice, making notes in a legal pad. Then she took the headphones off and set them on the desk. "If these recordings are real," she said, "then this is much more serious than it looks. Straight charity fraud, fake receipts, and possibly some kind of interference with the treatment itself. If we prove that last part, we're talking about a much heavier criminal case, maybe even a death caused by their actions. I don't need guesses. I need proof so solid they can't twist out of it." "Good. Then turn off the grieving father mode and turn on the cold head. If you want to destroy them, act professionally. You can cry later. Right now, give me the papers." They started that same day. Hospital discharge summaries, prescriptions, receipts from private centers, bank transfers, social media posts, foundation details. Nell spread the documents across the desk with the speed of someone who had seen dozens of similar schemes and knew exactly where to look for the seams. The picture came together in a week. Leo had created several pages on behalf of concerned friends of the family. Photos of Tessa, medical documents, some genuine, some altered, emotional posts begging people to help. The money went to personal cards and accounts opened under other people's names. At the same time, he arranged paid consultations and imported medications through acquaintances at private clinics. He sent Daniel invoices, inflated 3 or 4 times over, and kept the difference for himself. Daniel went to Rebecca the next day, without warning, in his work jacket, straight from his shift. His sister opened the door with a rehearsed expression of warm sadness. She hugged him and began murmuring about how thin he had gotten, how little he slept, how hard it was for her without sweet little Tessa. "Rebecca, please sit down. We need to talk, and we need to do it seriously." Of course. I'll put the kettle on. You just came from work. You must be starving. We'll have some tea." "No kettle." He took the smartwatch out of his pocket and placed it on the table. Then he put Scout beside it. Rebecca froze over the cups, turned around, saw them, and the color drained from her face. Daniel knew that expression. He had seen it at the plant on people who had just been told there would be an unplanned inspection. "Tessa left audio recordings," he said. "She recorded everything. About you and Leo." "Danny, dear God, I don't understand what you're talking about." "What recordings? You understand perfectly." He stood and left. Not because there was nothing left to say, but because he knew guilt works better in silence. Guilty people talk too much when they realize someone already knows the truth. You give them space, and they fill it with their own mistakes. The next day, he came back. This time, he was wearing a hidden recorder. Nell had instructed him. Rebecca opened the door, and from deep inside the apartment, a man's voice drifted out. Leo Walker was there, hiding at Daniel's sister's place while Daniel was burying his daughter. "Well, since you're here, come in," Rebecca said. "Why stand in the doorway?" She stepped back without looking him in the eye. "Leo just stopped by for something." "I can hear him." Daniel walked into the room. Leo sat at the table with a cup in front of him, his shirt unbuttoned at the collar, trying to look calm. He leaned back in his chair and folded his arms across his chest. "Daniel, listen, don't do anything rash. I completely understand how much you're suffering right now. We're all losing our minds over this too. But let's sit down like adults and calmly sort everything out. Let's try. I now know about your fake fundraisers down to the last dollar. I know about the front accounts and the clinics that don't exist. I know about the hidden recordings. And I know you realized, in time, that Tessa could hear you perfectly." Silence. Leo licked his lips and spoke in the soft, measured tone Daniel had hated from the very first day. "You simply don't fully understand the specifics, Daniel. We were coordinating an extremely complex treatment process. We were doing resource optimization under incredibly difficult, almost emergency circumstances. We had to make very hard decisions on the fly regarding the therapeutic protocol to keep the situation balanced." "You know," Daniel interrupted, "at my plant, there's a guy just like you, real smart. Loves pretty words. Last week, he managed to drop an expensive pump right off the crane. In the official report, he wrote, 'An unplanned gravitational relocation of an industrial object occurred.' Guess what? They still fired him for cause. And the pump didn't fix itself because the wording sounded fancy." Leo went silent for a second, and in that second, the mask cracked. His eyes darted toward Rebecca. "We were bending over backward and taking every possible measure to truly help that girl," he forced out. "No. You were only taking the measures that let you make money off her illness as long and as cynically as possible." Rebecca stood by the wall, wrapping her arms around herself. Daniel watched her fall apart, not all at once, but piece by piece, like a structure after someone knocked out the load-bearing beam. "Leo came to me and said this was our only chance," she began, her voice rising and breaking. "He said a chance like this only comes once in a lifetime, and it would be stupid to miss it. At first, it really was simple. We wanted to help raise money for hard-to-get medicine, but then these huge sums started passing through my hands, hundreds of thousands of dollars, and I just lost my head. I couldn't stop anymore. Danny, I swear to you, I never imagined we'd go this far, that it would turn into this madness." And when Tessa started repeating the adult phrases she overheard word for word, Daniel continued, "When she started asking me strange questions that made my hair stand up, that's when you really panicked, didn't you?" Rebecca covered her face with her hands. Leo said the sentence that closed the whole thing. If she had openly told anyone outside this room, they would have hauled all of us straight to prison. Daniel looked at him. A living child had become a threat to their scheme, and at some point, her getting worse had stopped being the thing they feared. Nell was waiting outside and recording in parallel. The police arrived 20 minutes later. There were no heroic scenes, just two people caught with no way out. During the search, investigators found messages between Leo, Rebecca, and Lauren. Businesslike, operational, cold. In them, Tessa's worsening condition was discussed as a window for a new post, and the final stage as the most emotionally sensitive moment for donations. Leo was taken away first. Until the last second, he demanded a lawyer and asked the officers to be careful with the seized property. Lauren was arrested a few days later. She had gone to distant relatives and tried to withdraw a large amount of cash from accounts where donations had been deposited. She did not run to her daughter's grave. She ran to an ATM. Daniel brought Scout to court. When he was allowed to speak, he looked at all three of them, one by one, without rushing. "You took my little daughter's fatal diagnosis and turned it into a profitable business project. You cynically won her child's trust, and when you realized she was smarter than you You started treating her like an inconvenient risk. You used my desperation, my complete willingness to accept any help, and made it your cover, but you never managed to break her or defeat her. Tessa understood who you really were long before the fog lifted from my eyes. Even alone with her illness, she showed 1,000 times more courage than the three of you put together. The sentences were severe. Leo was convicted of large-scale fraud, negligent actions contributing to a child's death, falsification of medical documents, and organizing a criminal group. The investigation proved that his actions in substituting and delaying treatment protocols had directly worsened the child's chances. Rebecca and Lauren were convicted as accomplices for concealing information and knowingly participating in the scheme. The investigation also revealed that Tessa had not been their only victim. There was a wider network of donation fraud built around seriously ill children. When Pops learned the details, the news spread through the plant faster than a shift siren. He came up to Daniel in the break room, sat across from him, chewed on his matchstick, and said, "Listen, Miller, I've worked this place for 30 years. I've seen all kinds of things. I've seen people shove their own hands into a lathe out of pure stupidity. I've seen main pressure lines burst at 170 pounds per square inch so hard the walls shook. But to deliberately make money off your own dying child, brother, even with all my life experience, that's a level of savagery beyond my qualifications. I'm officially not certified for that." Pops, let's be honest. Lately, everything is beyond your qualifications. Last week, you managed to burn a cheap electric kettle in the break room down to charcoal. That happened one time. Why do you have to bring it up immediately? Pops jabbed the matchstick in the air. One unfortunate incident in 30 years of flawless service. That is not clumsiness. That is a pure statistical error. Understood. Leo lost the thing he valued most, connections and reputation. His name became a curse in Pittsburgh. People who used to greet him with firm handshakes now spoke it in low voices, like a diagnosis. The family stopped mentioning Rebecca. Her name was cut out of conversations as carefully as she had once cut conscience out of her own decisions. Lauren lost her last shelter, ambiguity. She could no longer hide behind the image of a suffering mother, because the world had seen her real face. A few weeks after the verdict, Daniel was sorting through Tessa's things, pencils, notebooks, sketchbooks. Among the drawings, he found a bright, colorful page. A man with broad shoulders and a crown on his head. Beside him, a little figure with long hair and a huge smile. At the bottom, in uneven child's handwriting, it said, "My dad is the bravest in the whole world. He always finds everything out." Daniel stood for a long time with the page in his hand. The hardest thing was not hating the guilty. That turned out to be easy. The hardest thing was lifting the sentence he had passed on himself. A man can watch the people who destroyed his home fall and still feel that he was too late, that he could have been faster, that he should have noticed sooner. But Tessa had known he would notice. She believed it so deeply that she hid the proof inside an old rabbit, never doubting her father would find it. Scout now stands on a shelf behind glass in Daniel's room, stitched up with a new patch along his side, one ear still longer than the other. Not as a fragile memory, but as a witness. A coworker who stopped by saw the rabbit behind the glass and asked, "Whoa, Daniel, what do you have sitting in there behind glass? Looks like some kind of battle trophy from the old days." "Think bigger," Daniel answered. "That's our former head of security. Retired with honors. Come on, you're joking, right?" "I'm completely serious." He closed the most important investigation of his life. Did the job perfectly. so now he has every right to serve from the shelf. Daniel poured his guest tea, set the cup on the table, and turned toward the shelf for just a second. The worst enemy is not the one who threatens you to your face. It is the one who shows up offering help after already calculating how much money can be made from you before you collapse. Justice does not bring daughters back. Daniel learned that in the cruelest way possible, but the voice of a 7-year-old girl hidden inside an old stuffed rabbit turned out to be stronger than all the lies they built around her. And the head of security, the one with the worn-out face and mismatched ears, saw the case through to the end, just as promised, because Tessa had appointed him for a reason. She never did anything for no reason. If this story touched you, tell me in the comments what you would have done in Daniel's place, or whether you've ever had to uncover a truth no one wanted you to see. Give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, and tap the bell so you don't miss the next story.